They say the only difference between a crazy person and a visionary is $1 billion. But I'm going to tell you the truth. The difference isn't the money. The difference is pain. Most people think wealth is built on spreadsheets and stock markets. But if you look at the history of the 0.01%, you'll find that the greatest fortunes are almost always built on a foundation of pure, unadulterated rejection. This is the story of Leo. A man who went from splitting a $5 meal with his roommate in a freezing dorm room to signing a check that bought the very skyline of New York City. Let me take you to the end before we begin. The date is October 14, 2024. The location is the Grand Ballroom of the Pierre Hotel. It's the kind of room where the air smells like old money and expensive secrets. Marcus Sterling, the shipping magnate, is holding court. He's laughing, swirling a glass of scotch that costs more than your car. He thinks he's celebrating his company's 50th anniversary. But he's wrong. The double doors at the back of the room swing open. The chatter stops. The music fades. In walks Leo. He's not wearing the tattered hoodie from 10 years ago. He's wearing a bespoke suit cut so sharp it could draw blood. He doesn't look at the crowd. He doesn't look at Elena, the woman standing next to Marcus, clutching her pearl necklace, her face pale as a ghost. Leo walks straight to the billionaire. The silence is deafening. He drops a single file folder onto the linen tablecloth. It slides across the table and hits Marcus's glass with a dull thud. Leo leans in. He doesn't shout. He whispers. "You told me to come back when I could afford the air in this room, Marcus. So I bought the building. And now, I'm evicting you." In that moment, you aren't seeing a business deal. You are witnessing a decade of cold, hard rage finally finding its home. But to understand why a man would spend 10 years and $100 million just to ruin another man's dinner party, we have to go back. We have to go back to the night Leo died. 10 years earlier. Oxford. Winter. Leo wasn't a shark yet. He was a scholarship kid. He was studying 18 hours a day, coding on a laptop held together by duct tape, fueled by instant coffee and a dream. He was in love with Elena Sterling. She was the golden girl. The heiress. To Leo, she wasn't a dollar sign. She was the only warm thing in a cold world. He had saved for 6 months to buy a ring. It wasn't much, a tiny diamond barely visible to the naked eye, but it was everything he had. He went to the Sterling estate to ask her father for his blessing. He thought his passion would matter. He thought his potential would matter. He was naive. Marcus Sterling didn't even let him into the house. He met him at the gate, flanked by private security. It was raining. Leo was soaked to the bone, clutching that cheap velvet box in his pocket. Marcus laughed. It was a cruel, hollow sound. "My daughter is Sterling," he said. "She is a thoroughbred. You are a stray dog. Do yourself a favor, boy. Go find a girl in your own tax bracket before I have you arrested for trespassing." Leo looked past him. He saw Elena in the window. She saw him standing in the rain. And she closed the curtains. That was the moment the boy died. And the billionaire was born. Most people would have given up. They would have accepted their place in the hierarchy. But Leo didn't get sad. He got strategic. He realized that in this world, love doesn't conquer all. Leverage does. So he disappeared. He went into the dark. And he built a system. A specific, ruthless 3-step blueprint to scale from 0 to $100 million with terrifying speed. What you are about to watch is not just a success story. It is a masterclass in psychological warfare and aggressive wealth accumulation. We are going to break down exactly how he did it. The risks. The illegal gray areas. The sleepless nights. And the specific financial maneuvers he used to steal the kingdom from the king. But be warned, the view from the top is beautiful. But it's lonely. Before we begin this incredible journey, welcome to the channel. I want to be honest with you. This video took many hours to research, good hours to write, and quality hours to produce. Every detail you're about to hear was carefully verified and crafted to bring you the most compelling version of this story. If you appreciate that level of dedication, please hit the subscribe button. It truly means the world and helps me continue creating these in-depth stories for you. And before we dive into step 1, I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered what separates those who build lasting wealth from those who lose everything? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single comment. Before the private jets and the hostile takeovers, Leo's net worth wasn't measured in billions. It was measured in how many days he could make a loaf of bread last. Leo grew up in a council estate on the outskirts of Manchester. It was the kind of place where dreams go to die, suffocated by gray skies and gray concrete. His father left before Leo learned to walk. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, coming home with swollen feet and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She smelled like grease and exhaustion. Leo remembers the sound of her crying through the thin walls when the heating bill arrived. That sound, it wired his brain differently. While other kids were playing football, Leo was obsessed with numbers. Not because he loved math, but because he realized early on that numbers were the only thing that didn't lie. If you had 5 pounds, you ate. If you had 0, you didn't. It was brutal math. And he vowed he would solve it. By 16, Leo was a ghost. He didn't go to parties. He didn't have a girlfriend. He sat in the local library, reading biographies of Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Gates until the librarian kicked him out at closing time. He saw a pattern. A code. He realized that poverty wasn't a lack of character. It was a lack of information. And that hunger for information became his golden ticket. At 18, the impossible happened. A full academic scholarship to Oxford University. Computer science. Leo arrived on campus with everything he owned in 2 duffel bags. Picture the contrast. Gothic architecture. Manicured lawns. Students parking Porsches their parents bought for graduation gifts. And then there was Leo, wearing scuffed sneakers and a coat from a thrift store. He walked into the dining hall and felt it immediately. The invisible wall. These kids spoke a different language. They talked about skiing in the Alps and summering in the Hamptons. Leo didn't even have a passport. He felt like an imposter, a fraud waiting to be exposed. He spent his first semester with his head down, terrified that if he made noise, they'd realize they made a mistake and send him back to Manchester. But fear is a powerful fuel. Leo outworked everyone. When the rich kids went to the pub, Leo was in the computer lab. When they slept, he coded. He was building the foundation of a mind that would one day terrify Wall Street. But then he made a fatal error. He got distracted. He met her. Elena Sterling. She wasn't just rich. She was old money rich. Her father, Marcus Sterling, owned half the shipping routes in the Atlantic. Elena was different, though. She was kind. She saw Leo not for his shoes, but for his mind. They met in a philosophy elective. She borrowed a pen. He forgot how to speak. For 6 months, they lived in a bubble. Late night walks through the cobblestone streets. Sharing cheap coffee on park benches. For the first time in his life, Leo forgot about the math. He forgot about the survival instinct. He let his guard down. He believed that love could bridge the gap between a council estate and a country manor. He was wrong. It all came crashing down the weekend of Elena's 21st birthday. She invited him to her family's estate in the Cotswolds. A sprawling mansion with gates taller than Leo's childhood home. This was the test. Leo arrived nervous. He had spent his entire savings account, about £400, on a vintage first edition book for her. A thoughtful, romantic gift. He walked up the driveway, rehearsing his introduction to her father. Marcus Sterling was waiting on the terrace. He was a man who wore power like a second skin. He didn't smile. He didn't offer a hand. Marcus looked at the book in Leo's hand. Then he looked at Leo's cheap suit. Do you know how much the landscaping of this property costs per month, son? Marcus asked. Leo shook his head. £15,000, Marcus said, taking a sip of wine. That's 3 times what your mother makes in a year. I checked. The air left Leo's lungs. He had been investigated. You are a tourist here, Marcus continued, his voice terrifyingly calm. Elena is going through a rebellious phase. I tolerate it. But don't mistake my tolerance for acceptance. You are not part of this future. At that moment, Elena walked out. She saw her father. She saw Leo. Leo waited for her to defend him. He waited for her to scream, to fight, to grab his hand. But she didn't. She looked at her shoes. She was afraid of losing her inheritance. She was afraid of the cold. Leo didn't scream. He simply placed the book on the table, turned around, and walked back down the driveway. The walk to the train station took an hour. It started to rain. Leo sat on the train back to Oxford, wet, shivering, and humiliated. But as the miles passed, something shifted. The sadness evaporated. In its place, something harder formed. A cold, metallic resolve. Marcus was right, Leo thought. I am a tourist. Because I have no leverage. He realized the system was rigged. You can't win by playing by the rules when the people at the top own the rulebook. You have to break the game. He got back to his dorm room at 3 a.m. He didn't sleep. He took a red marker and wrote 3 words on his mirror. 1. Capture. 2. Scale. 3. Kill. This wasn't a grocery list. This was a war plan. Leo decided that night he wouldn't just get rich. He would build an empire so large that Marcus Sterling would look like a pauper next to him. He dropped out of Oxford the next morning. He traded a degree for a gamble. He had an idea for an algorithm. An idea that was dangerous, borderline illegal, and brilliant. He was about to enter the gray zone. Leo's choice to drop out and pursue revenge was extreme. It cost him his youth. It cost him his morals. But it got him the billion. I want to ask you something honestly. If you were born into Leo's circumstances, humiliated by the person you looked up to, do you think you would have made the same choice? Or would you have walked away and found peace? Let me know what you think in the comments. Because what happens next is where the real danger begins. Leo didn't just drop out of Oxford. He dropped off the face of the earth. He moved into a windowless basement apartment in East London, shared with 4 strangers and a colony of mice. It was a brutal transition. No more dreaming in ivory towers. Now, his reality was a flickering monitor and the smell of stale coffee. The inciting incident came at 4:14 a.m. on a Tuesday. Leo was analyzing the Sterling Group's logistics software, a system Marcus Sterling believed was unhackable. Leo found the ghost in the machine. A tiny latency in how shipping rates were calculated. He realized that if he could predict these fluctuations, he could front-run the market. It was a digital gold mine. But he had a problem. He had 0 capital. His only support system was his roommate, Sam, a former high-frequency trader who had been blacklisted for being too aggressive. Sam looked at Leo's code and didn't see a tech project. He saw a weapon. To get the first $50,000 to launch his algorithm, Leo had to make a choice that would stain his soul. He didn't go to a bank. He went to a private lender, the kind of man you only meet in the back of a dimly lit betting shop. Leo put up the only thing he had left as collateral, his mother's tiny apartment in Manchester. He didn't tell her. The first month was a bloodbath. The algorithm glitched. He lost $12,000 in 48 hours. Sam told him to pull the plug. His mother called him, crying because she couldn't reach him, and the guilt almost paralyzed him. But hardship reveals the true character of a predator. Leo didn't blink. He spent 72 hours straight recoding the core logic. He learned to detach from the fear of losing, and replaced it with the necessity of winning. On day 31, the screen flashed green. A profit of $8,000. Then $20,000. Then $100,000. Leo wasn't happy. He was relieved. He paid back the lender, but he didn't tell his mother. He didn't buy a car. He reinvested every cent. The stay dog was finally learning how to bite. He was no longer coding for a degree. He was coding for a crown. But the deeper he went, the more he realized that to truly destroy Marcus Sterling, he couldn't just be rich. He had to be a ghost. At this point, Leo had to choose between option A, Taking his first million, moving his mother to a mansion, and living a quiet, happy life. Or option B, risking it all on a high-stakes gamble to bankrupt the man who humiliated him. What would you have done? This decision would define everything that came next. The hardest part of building an empire isn't the work. It's the silence when everyone you love stops believing in you. By the second year, Leo's life was a waking nightmare. He had moved from that London basement to a tiny office in a warehouse district, but the pressure was suffocating. His algorithm was profitable, but it wasn't wealthy. It was just enough to keep the servers running. Then the floor fell out. A sudden regulatory change in high-frequency trading wiped out 60% of his liquid capital in a single afternoon. $420,000 vanished. Just like that. Leo sat in the dark, the blue light of the monitors reflecting off his hollow eyes. He hadn't seen the sun in 3 days. He was 24 years old, and he felt like he was 80. His mother called him that night. She told him the neighbors were asking why he hadn't been home. She asked if he was okay. Leo lied. He told her he was doing great, while staring at a bank balance that wouldn't cover next month's rent. Hanging up that phone was the hardest thing he'd ever done. The guilt felt like a physical weight in his chest. He was at a breaking point. No sleep, no money, and no Elena. He'd see her occasionally in the society pages, smiling at equestrian events, draped in the arm of some duke or hedge fund heir. Every photo was a fresh serrated blade to his ego. He wasn't just losing the money. He was losing his mind. He began to wonder if Marcus Sterling was right. Maybe he was just a stray dog barking at the moon. But when you have nothing left to lose, you become the most dangerous person in the room. Leo was sitting in a dive bar, nursing a drink he couldn't afford, when he met Arthur. Arthur was 60, disheveled, and smelled of cheap cigars. But he had eyes like a hawk. He was a retired fixer for the very banks Leo was trying to outrun. Arthur had been chewed up and spit out by the same system that Marcus Sterling ruled. Arthur watched Leo sketching data structures on a napkin and rasped, "You're trying to outrun them, kid. You can't. You have to trip them." Arthur didn't give Leo money. He gave him something better. The map. He showed Leo where the Sterling Group hid their debt. He showed him the structural cracks in Marcus's shipping empire that no one, not even the auditors, could see. This was the spark. Leo didn't quit. He doubled down. He sold his remaining equipment, moved back into the London basement, and started coding a new beast. Not a trading bot this time. A predatory acquisition engine. A tool designed to find failing companies, strip them for parts, and use the cash to buy the next one. Do you think Leo should have taken Arthur's advice and played dirty? Or was there a cleaner way to build this wealth without becoming the very thing he hated? Share your perspective below. The next 3 years were a blur of calculated aggression. Leo became a ghost investor. He bought distressed assets under 40 different shell companies. He lived on caffeine and spite. He wasn't buying houses or watches. He was buying leverage. Every small win, a $50,000 profit here, a $200,000 flip there, went straight back into the engine. He developed a reputation in the shadows as a vulture. Someone who could smell a failing business before the CEO even knew they were in trouble. His character shifted. The soft edges of the Oxford student were gone, replaced by a cold analytical precision. He stopped feeling the cold. He stopped feeling the loneliness. He was becoming a machine. One night Sam, his old roommate, asked him, "When is it enough, Leo? You've got 10 million in the bank. You won. Go home." Leo didn't even look up from his screen. He just said, 10 million doesn't buy a kingdom, Sam. It only buys a seat at the table. I don't want a seat. I want the table." Meanwhile, the world was changing. Marcus Sterling was getting older, and his ego was making him blind. He was over-leveraging his shipping fleet to buy luxury hotels. He thought he was untouchable. He didn't notice the vulture circling his assets. He didn't notice that his debt was being bought up, cent by cent, by a company called Acheron Holdings. Leo chose that name for a reason. In mythology, Acheron is the river of woe. The seeds of the confrontation were sown. While Marcus was hosting galas and bragging about his expansion, Leo was in a dark room in East London, holding the digital keys to Marcus's front door. Leo had built his skill set out of pure necessity. He could now read a balance sheet better than an AI. He could negotiate a deal with a shark and come out with the shark's teeth. He was ready. But then he got a letter. It wasn't a legal threat. It was a wedding invitation. Elena was marrying a billionaire heir in 6 months. The wedding was set to be the event of the decade. The social event of the century. Leo held the gold-embossed card in his calloused hands. He didn't cry. He didn't even get angry. He just checked his calendar. That wedding was the same day the final debt payments for the Sterling Group were due. The struggle was over. The hunt had begun. We're at the midpoint of this incredible story. If you're still here, I genuinely appreciate you. This journey from a Manchester estate to the brink of a $100 million empire is about to hit its peak. What's kept you engaged so far? Is it the revenge, the business strategy, or the hope that Leo finds his soul again? Let me know in the comments. Success is a slow burn but transformation. That happens in a heartbeat. Usually the moment you stop trying to join the club and decide to own it. The year was 2021. The global economy was twitching, and while the giants were distracted by the chaos, Leo saw his opening. He wasn't a ghost anymore. He was a force. The breakthrough didn't come from a stock tip. It came from a hostile takeover of a mid-sized logistics firm called Northstar. On paper, it looked like a boring acquisition. But Leo knew something Marcus Sterling didn't. Northstar held the exclusive patents for the routing software Marcus's entire fleet relied on. Leo signed the closing documents in a sterile boardroom, his hand steady. He remembered the feeling of the rain in the Cotswolds. He remembered the sound of the curtains closing. For the first time in 10 years, he didn't feel like a scholarship kid. He felt like the architect of his own universe. He walked out of that building and bought his first bespoke suit. Not to show off, but because he realized that in the world of high finance, your clothes are your armor. With Northstar under his belt, the momentum became an avalanche. He wasn't just making money. He was building a web. He used the profits from the patents to buy into distressed real estate, then used those assets as collateral to move into energy. Every win was a brick in a wall that was slowly surrounding the Sterling Group. And Marcus. He was too arrogant to notice. He saw a new player named Acheron Holdings making waves, but he assumed it was just another hedge fund run by some Ivy League suit. He had no idea the wolf was already inside the fence. As Leo's net worth crossed the $50 million mark, his lifestyle underwent a radical, calculated upgrade. He moved into a penthouse in Canary Wharf, glass walls, minimalist furniture, and a view that made the world look like a chessboard. But he didn't become a playboy. He became a shadow. He gained a reputation for being the Ice King. He was the guy who could walk into a failing company and find the one lever that would make it profitable in 90 days. Imagine him standing at that glass wall, watching the sun set over London. He's no longer the boy with the duffel bag. He's the man who can move markets with a single text message. He finally did something he'd put off for a decade. He went back to Manchester. He didn't drive a Lamborghini or wear a Rolex. He took the train. He sat in his mother's tiny kitchen and handed her a simple manila envelope. Inside was the deed to her apartment, fully paid off, along with a trust fund that ensured she would never have to work a second in her life again. She looked at him with tears in her eyes and asked, "Leo, what did you have to do to get this?" He just kissed her forehead and said, "I just finished the math, Mom. That's all." It was a lie, of course. He had done much more than math. He had traded his peace for power. But seeing her safe was the first time he'd felt wealthy in his entire life. By year 8, the ghost was worth $100 million. The network effects were in full swing. Because he was successful, more opportunities found him. He didn't have to hunt anymore. The prey was walking into his office. He had influential allies now. Ministers, tech titans, and bankers who owed him favors. He was no longer just a billionaire's rival. He was a systemic threat. Meanwhile, Marcus Sterling was bleeding. His over-leveraged hotel expansion was failing. Interest rates were rising, and his debt was being sold off by banks looking to de-risk. Who was buying that debt? Acheron Holdings. Leo was now Marcus Sterling's largest creditor. He literally owned Marcus's ability to borrow money. He was the bank. Then came the final piece of the puzzle. The wedding. Elena was set to marry Julian Vane, the heir to a banking dynasty. It was a merger disguised as a romance. Marcus needed Vane's capital to save his shipping empire. Leo sat in his office, looking at the invitation. He realized that Elena wasn't the golden girl anymore. She was a bartering chip. Her father was selling her to save his pride. Leo didn't feel pity. He felt a cold, final clarity. He picked up the phone and called Arthur, his old fixer. "It's time," Leo said. "Trigger the default clauses on the Sterling debt. I want the foreclosure notices served on the morning of the wedding." The transformation was complete. The boy who was kicked out in the rain was gone. In his place was a man who understood the most brutal truth of the elite. The only way to ensure you never get hurt again is to own the room where the pain is dealt. Leo spent the week before the wedding in total silence. He didn't check the markets. He didn't code. He just prepared his armor. He was no longer seeking a seat at the table. He was coming to take the room. Marcus Sterling was still laughing at his clubs, telling his friends that the Vane merger would make him the most powerful man in Europe. He had no idea that the ghost was standing right behind him, holding a scythe. The stage was set. The players were in position. And the debt was due. Leo's journey has taken him from a freezing dorm room to a $100 million throne. But to get there, he had to cut out every piece of his heart that made him vulnerable. He is unrecognizable from the kid who bought a first edition book for the girl he loved. This brings me to a question I want to ask you. At this point, Leo has transformed into someone completely different. Do you think people can truly change their soul, or does our core nature stay the same, even when we're covered in gold? Is he still that scholarship kid, or has he become Marcus Sterling 2.0? Drop your thoughts in the comments because what happens at the wedding is going to change how you think about justice forever. October 14th wasn't supposed to be the day the Sterling Empire fell. It was supposed to be the day it was immortalized. The air inside the Pierre Hotel was thick with the scent of $5,000 lilies and the quiet hum of predatory power. This was the wedding of the century. The merger of the Sterling shipping fortune and the Vane banking dynasty. For Marcus Sterling, this was the final move on a chessboard he'd been playing for 40 years. He stood in the bridal suite, adjusting his tuxedo in a gilded mirror. He looked like a king. But if you looked closely at his hands, those hands that had once signed off on global trade routes, they were twitching. He was $120 million in debt. The hotels were bleeding. The ships were docked. Julian Vane, the groom, was his only lifeboat. Marcus wasn't marrying off a daughter. He was selling a shield. Elena sat in the corner, a vision in Vera Wang lace. She looked like a masterpiece, but her eyes were vacant. She knew. She had always known. She was the collateral for a life she no longer wanted. What Marcus didn't know, what no one in that room knew, was that at 9 a.m. sharp, a series of automated triggers had been pulled in a glass office 3 miles away. The Acheron debt had been called in. The grace period was over. The ghost was no longer hiding. The ceremony was minutes away. The ballroom was packed with the 1% of the 1%. Senators, CEOs, and heirs sat on velvet chairs, waiting for the music to start. Then, the heavy oak doors at the back of the hall didn't just open. They were held open. Leo didn't sneak in. He didn't come with a scene. He walked down the center aisle with the calm, measured pace of a man walking into his own living room. He was wearing a midnight blue suit that seemed to absorb the light around it. His hair was perfectly groomed, his face lean and tan. He looked younger than the men in the room, but he carried a weight that made them instinctively straighten their ties. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 lawyers, the kind of men who charge 4 figures an hour just to breathe. The murmur started at the back and moved forward like a wave. Marcus Sterling, standing at the altar next to Julian Vane, froze. He squinted, his brain struggling to reconcile the billionaire in front of him with the wet, broken boy he'd kicked off his porch 10 years ago. Leo stopped 10 feet from the altar. He didn't look at the crowd. He didn't even look at Elena, though he could feel her gaze burning into his side. He looked directly at Marcus. Marcus stepped forward, his face flushing a deep angry purple. "What is this?" Marcus hissed, his voice echoing in the silent hall. "This is a private event. Security." Leo didn't flinch. He didn't even raise his voice. "The security works for me now, Marcus," Leo said. "I bought the firm this morning, along with your mortgage. And your fleet." The room gasped. It was a sound like a collective intake of air. Julian Vane stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "Who the hell are you?" Leo finally turned his head. "I'm the man who owns your father's bank, Julian. We should talk about your wedding gift later. It involves a lot of foreclosure paperwork." Leo reached into his jacket and pulled out a single sheet of paper. He didn't hand it to Marcus. He handed it to the priest. "Read the header," Leo commanded. The priest, hands trembling, leaned in. "Acheron Holdings. Final notice of default." The ghost had a face, and it was the face of the boy Marcus had called a stray dog. In that moment, the power dynamic in the room didn't just shift, it shattered. The witnesses, the very people Marcus had spent his life trying to impress, were now watching his execution. They weren't coming to his aid. They were leaning in, hungry for the drama. You did this?" Marcus whispered, his voice cracking. 10 years. For this?" "Not just for this," Leo replied. "I did it to show you that a stray dog can buy the whole kennel if he's hungry enough. You told me to come back when I could afford the air in your house. Well, Marcus, the air is getting very expensive, and you're out of credit." The wedding of the century ended before the vows were even spoken. Julian Vane, seeing the ship sinking in real time, didn't even look at Elena. He looked at his lawyers, turned around, and walked out the side exit. The Vane dynasty didn't do charity cases. The guests followed. It was a stampede of silk and diamonds, everyone trying to distance themselves from the Sterling name before the news hit the wires. Marcus Sterling sat down on the altar steps, his head in his hands. He looked small. For the first time, he looked his age. The mansion, the fleet, the reputation, it was all gone. Not because of a market crash, but because of a grudge he'd forgotten he'd earned. Elena walked down the steps. She stood in front of Leo. Her white veil was pushed back. She looked at him, not with love, not with hate, but with a profound, tragic understanding. "Was it worth it?" she asked. Leo looked at her. He looked at the $100 million empire he'd built. He looked at the man he'd become. "I thought I'd feel a rush," Leo thought. "I thought I'd feel the warmth of the fire as his world burned." But as he stood there in the middle of the empty, expensive ballroom, he realized he felt nothing. The anger that had fueled him for 3,650 days had simply evaporated. Leo didn't kick Marcus out of the hotel. He didn't have him arrested. He did something much worse. He offered him a job. "I need a consultant for the shipping division," Leo said, looking down at the broken man. "Someone who knows the old routes. The pay is $60,000 a year. It's a good living, Marcus. For a man in your tax bracket." That was the final blow. True justice wasn't taking Marcus's money. It was taking his superiority. Leo walked out of the Pierre Hotel and into the crisp New York morning. He didn't take the limo. He started walking. He realized that the three-step blueprint hadn't just built a $100 million empire. It had built a cage. And for the first time in a decade, he was stepping out of it. He pulled his phone from his pocket and did something he hadn't done since Oxford. He turned it off. The revenge was over. The success was documented. But the life was finally just beginning. Leo got everything he wanted. He humiliated his enemy, protected his mother, and became one of the most powerful men in the city. But he walked away from the wedding alone. The confrontation is over. Do you feel satisfied with how this played out? Did Leo go too far, or was this the only way to get true closure? Or would you have wanted him to do something different? Perhaps forgive them sooner? There's no wrong answer here. Drop your thoughts below. The dust from a collapse like that doesn't settle quickly, but when it does, the landscape is unrecognizable. Marcus Sterling's fall was absolute. Within 48 hours of the wedding disaster, the Sterling Group filed for Chapter 11. The social repercussions were even swifter. The friends Marcus had bought over 40 years vanished like smoke. His names were scrubbed from boardrooms and charity galas. Today, Marcus doesn't live in a mansion. He lives in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a part of London he used to call the slums. He spends his mornings in a park, feeding birds, waiting for a phone to ring that went silent years ago. He is the ghost now. A man who built his life on the shifting sands of ego, only to watch the tide come in. Meanwhile, Leo's rise didn't stop at revenge. He realized that holding a grudge is a full-time job, and he was ready to retire from it. He transitioned Acheron Holdings from a predatory firm into a venture capital powerhouse. But he added a twist. He created the Scholarship Seed Fund. He began scouting for kids in council estates. Kids with duct-taped laptops and brilliant minds. He became the mentor he never had, providing the leverage that Marcus Sterling tried to steal from him. Leo's vindication came full circle when he opened a state-of-the-art tech campus on the very land in Manchester where he grew up. He didn't name it after himself. He named it after his mother. As for Elena, the merger with Julian Vane was officially annulled. She used her remaining personal trust to disappear. She didn't go back to her father. She's now running a non-profit in Southeast Asia, building schools. She and Leo don't speak, but once a year, a first edition book arrives at her office with no return address. Leo often sits in his glass office, looking at the city. He understands now that Marcus's cruelty wasn't a curse. It was a catalyst. It was the grit that made the pearl. He is grateful for the rain in the Cotswolds. He is grateful for the closed curtains. Without that pain, he would have been just another comfortable graduate. With it, he became a titan. The boy from Manchester solved the math. He found that the ultimate wealth isn't the balance in your account. It's the power to ensure no one can ever tell you what you're worth again. Looking at where everyone ended up, I have to ask, do you believe in karma? A cosmic force that balanced the scales for Leo? Or is this just the natural, cold consequence of the choices Marcus made? I want to hear what you think in the comments. The most expensive thing Leo ever bought wasn't a penthouse or a private jet. It was the realization that he never needed Marcus Sterling's approval to be a king. As we look back at this 10-year journey, the $100 million empire is just the scenery. The real story is the man who was forged in the fire of rejection. You see, wealth is often misunderstood. We track it in bank balances and stock portfolios, but true wealth is the ability to walk into any room and know that your value isn't tied to the price of your suit. It's about character over circumstance. Leo proved that while you cannot control where you start, you have absolute authority over where you finish. Justice, in its purest form, wasn't found in the bankruptcy of the Sterling Group. It was found in Leo's excellence. He didn't just defeat his enemy. He made his enemy irrelevant. When you spend your life seeking revenge, you stay tied to the person who hurt you. But when you seek growth, you eventually reach a height where you can no longer even see them. That is the ultimate victory. But what does a man like Leo do when the war is over? What happens when the stray dog finally owns the world? Leo's philosophy today is surprisingly simple. If you asked him for the 3-step blueprint now, he wouldn't talk to you about code or hostile takeovers. He would tell you, first, master your mind. If you can't control your reactions to pain, you'll always be a slave to the people who cause it. Second, build leverage. Find the thing you do better than anyone else and use it to solve a problem the world is too lazy to fix. And third, protect your peace. He recently spoke at a graduation ceremony, not at Oxford, but at a community college in Manchester. He looked at the students and said, "The world will try to tell you what you're worth based on your zip code or your last name. They are lying. You are worth exactly what you refuse to settle for. Don't look for a seat at their table. Go out there and build your own. Then choose who gets to sit with you. Leo has changed. The hard, cold edges of the Ice King have softened, not into weakness, but into wisdom. He no longer moves out of spite. He moves out of purpose. He's learned that money is just a tool. It's a great servant, but a terrible master. While Leo doesn't have children of his own yet, his legacy is already growing. The Scholarship Seed Fund has produced its first 50 graduates. These aren't just students. They are the Leos of the future. They are kids who saw their parents struggle and decided to break the cycle. Leo doesn't just give them money. He gives them the one thing he didn't have, a blueprint that doesn't require losing your soul. By investing in them, he is ensuring that the Marcus Sterlings of the world can never gatekeep success again. He is democratizing power. And that, more than any hostile takeover, is his greatest achievement. The generational pattern of poverty in his family didn't just stop. It was demolished. His mother's trust fund ensures she will never know fear again, and the kids he mentors will never have to beg for a chance. They will create their own. People often ask Leo if he feels a sense of triumph when he sees Marcus Sterling today. The answer is always no. There is no bitterness left. There is no anger. When Leo looks at Marcus, he doesn't see a villain. He sees a man who made the mistake of thinking that money was the same thing as power. Marcus was the wall I had to climb, Leo once wrote in a private journal. I don't hate the wall. I'm just glad I'm on the other side of it. Leo realized that Marcus's opinion never truly mattered. It only had power because Leo gave it power. The moment he stopped caring what the old money thought of him was the moment he truly became free. He is at peace with the journey. The hunger, the basement, the rain, and the betrayal. It was all necessary. It was the price of admission to a version of himself he loves. As we close this chapter, I want you to look at your own life. You might not be trying to build a $100 million empire. You might not have a Marcus Sterling standing in your way. But we all have our Oxford. We all have our nights in the rain. The lesson of Leo's life is that your current circumstances are a snapshot, not the whole movie. A temporary setback is often just a setup for a greater success. But that success only comes if you maintain your integrity. If you become the monster to defeat the monster, you haven't won. You've just traded places. Leo won because he stayed human. He won because he turned his pain into a ladder for others. Stop measuring your worth by someone else's ruler. Stop waiting for permission to be great. The world is full of people who will tell you no. Your job is to ignore them until you can buy the building they're standing in. Love yourself enough to transform. Trust yourself enough to fail. And be brave enough to build something that lasts longer than you do. Leo's story is one of a million, but it's also the story of anyone who refused to stay where they were put. What is the one Sterling in your life right now? That person or situation telling you that you aren't enough. And after hearing Leo's story, what is the first step you're going to take to prove them wrong? I want to hear your goals in the comments. Let's start a conversation about what true legacy looks like. We've traveled 3 hours through the life of a man who was told he was nothing, only to watch him become everything. Leo's journey didn't just take us from a rain-slicked porch in the Cotswolds to the gleaming towers of Canary Wharf. It took us through the very heart of what it means to be human. We watched a boy lose his innocence, a man find his rage, and a titan finally find his peace. From the 3-step blueprint to the silent halls of the Pierre Hotel, the transformation was absolute. But as we've seen, the $100 million wasn't the prize. The prize was the moment Leo realized he no longer needed to carry the weight of other people's opinions. This story is significant because it mirrors the struggles we all face. We might not be fighting shipping magnates, but we are all fighting the voices that tell us we aren't enough. Leo's victory offers a universal hope, that resilience is a superpower, and that your character is the only currency that never devalues. He didn't just survive the cruelty of the elite. He used it as the very fuel to surpass them. So, what does this mean for you? As you close this video, I want you to remember that your current circumstances are not your final destination. Whether you are in your own basement phase, or you're halfway up your mountain, don't let the Marcus Sterlings of your world define your worth. They can close the curtains on you, but they can't stop the sun from rising. Use your setbacks. Study the math of your own life. And most importantly, stay focused on the excellence that makes revenge unnecessary. If this story moved you, inspired you, or taught you something valuable about resilience and success, please leave a like and share your biggest takeaway in the comments. I read every single one, and your insights make this community special. Next time, I'll be telling you the untold story of Elias Thorne, the billionaire who walked away from a $10 billion tech empire to live in total anonymity, only to return when his enemies least expected it. His story of the Great Disappearance will absolutely blow your mind. You won't want to miss it. Remember, you are not defined by what others think of you. You are defined by how you respond when life tests you. Leo proved that the best response to cruelty isn't revenge. It's building a life so beautiful that your critics become irrelevant. Until next time, stay strong, stay focused, and never let anyone convince you that you're nothing.